Now we have exciting panel discussion on the role of digital infrastructure in reshaping health innovation. And for that, I want to welcome moderators for this session, Mr. Rajneesh Dey, consulting editor, APEC News Network, to come on stage, please. And I'll request him to announce the names of the speakers for the next panel. Over to you, Rajneesh.
Thank you. Thanks, Shavik. In the morning from the sessions that we are checked with a couple of stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem. First, the policymakers from the government side, then the hospital management side. Now we have a panel discussion involving another very critical stakeholder in that overall health ecosystem, the CIOs or the technology persons. So when we are talking about digital infrastructure, these are the people who are responsible for not only developing the digital infrastructure, but more critically maintaining it so that to make their health infrastructure more productive and successful. So it's my pleasure now to invite the panelists and one by one, I'll calling the name and will request each of you to take your seat on the stage. We have with us Mr. Vikas Bhatnagar, Group CIO of Asian Institute of Medical Sciences. We have with us Mr. Arun Goel, CIO of Sir Gangaram Hospital. We have with us Mr. Ajay Chabra, Chief Digital Officer of Yashoda Hospital and Research Center. We have with us Mr. Praveen Bisht, CIO of Amrita Hospitals. We have with us Mr. Himanshu Bharadwaj, Head HIS and IT Applications for Medanta, the Medicity Hospital. We have with us Mr. Anurup Sehgal, Cluster IT Lead for North India, Fortis Healthcare. And we have with us Mr. Balihar Virk, GM IT of SPS Hospitals. Thank you, gentlemen. A warm welcome to all of you again. And as we start, before we just proceed with the discussion, certain hygiene rules. Let's keep the answers very short and crisp, not more than 2 minutes each, so that we are able to discuss more points rather than just discussing 1 or 2 points. My first question is a common question, and I will ask each of you that one. We are talking about the digital infrastructure. So from your own hospital perspective, what, according to you, are the key components of a digital infrastructure in a hospital today? And the other part of this question is, how much has the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, accelerated the adoption of this digital infrastructure? So I'll start with you, Mr. Arun Goel. So your experience at Sir Gangaram in terms of adoption and how it happened in the last 1.5 years.
Thank you. The digital infrastructure improvement and acceptance in the healthcare fraternity during the COVID pandemic has been accelerating because the patients and clinicians have to maintain the distance, and that made particularly in the digital world or in the healthcare application made sure telemedicine got accelerated into it. Teleconsultation, telemedicine, that was a one aspect which got increased. Furthermore, the registration and approach and admissions of the patients need to make sure that your applications are not hanging. And particularly in hospitals during the COVID, we experienced that applications were flooded with the registration and discharges and all those things, and systems were getting hanged because of the network problem, if I say from the digital infrastructure improvement point of view. So that would have been one of the most focus area where you need to make sure that your systems are well integrated to make sure this type of pandemic gets addressed and load gets addressed and networks are not hanging with the huge data transmission among all the respective applications.
Thanks. So that's a very critical aspect. Unlike other sector, health is one where we cannot just afford applications hanging. So definitely the network infrastructure there is critical. So I'll come back to you on this point later. Now I'll go to you, Mr. Vikas. From your experience at Asian Institute, what are the critical components of the digital infrastructure and how much of that got accelerated during the pandemic?
Thank you. So I would say this digitalization we have been talking for long, but what we have seen during this COVID, it has really taken the pace. And what we have been trying to explain the public that we need to digitalize ourselves. So one of the key thing what we have done is in COVID, we all were like, we should be touch-free kind of environment we should have. So we tried something saying, let's not give invoices to the patient. When the billing happens, the invoice is generated, let's not give that to the patient. Let it go as an e-invoice. We all have been experiencing this in whether it's Zomato or everywhere, we are getting on e-invoice. But this is a very critical thing which has come up as in like the patients are not ready to accept that. But yes, we educated them. And today, I think apart from these government officers, all are accepting our e-invoicing.
Sir, if I may interrupt here, I'm talking from personal experience. One challenge here is, though I'm fairly tech savvy, but accepting e-invoice for myself as a patient might not even be a problem, but the healthcare insurance providers, they still want, even in these days, a physical copy of whatever digital invoice. So how do you tackle that?
Absolutely. So today there are two kind of environments out there. One is where the hospital is submitting the copies. There definitely we are giving a hard copy, printed, stamped. That's how they want it. But if in case patient wants something to be submitted for the reimbursement and they say, like as I said, the government sectors, in those cases, we do give printouts with stamped. But if you see, it's not about having 100% success of this. Our main focus was to getting people understand the importance of digitalization, and in COVID cases, they should go for a touch-free kind of environment. And if we are able to achieve 70%, if I'm saying, I think it's a great success.
Definitely. Thanks. So you have talked about the contactless e-invoices. Next, I'll come to you, Mr. Ajay Chabra. In terms of digitalization efforts at Yashoda, what has been the most critical thing that you have done?
Okay, so I came from IT background, IT industry, then I moved into from BI to AI to digital marketing, and this is my first stint at hospital. I'm the most, I would say, youngest peer for all of you because you might have come with a lot of hospital background. So definitely COVID pandemic has really changed the game of the business. And some of the things and initiatives which we are proud of is that having a group director level team, which I am leading right now as Chief Digital Marketing Officer, that we have access to the top management. Anybody from my team straight away can go and talk to him. There are no hierarchies first of all. So that's one, that we have removed all the hierarchies. Now our focus is on new customer acquisition via digital channels. That's my primary responsibility. We have been doing that very successfully because I came from digital marketing background, and my first stint in digital was 2005. So I'm the original digital guy in India basically, not the one people who will do a digital program and then come and join, let's say from VP marketing to VP digital marketing. That's not like that. So we took a lot of initiatives in terms of digitalization. Practically, I will define all the systems in any hospital into three different categories. One is the core digital basically, the things which you can't tamper with. There are some systems which are core, which is your hardware, networking. Even I will include your HIS system as part of that core digital. Now, on top of that, there are digital edge systems basically. There are systems which you create or which you sometimes acquire just to keep yourself ahead of the competition. Let's say getting a robotic arm or getting into connected ICUs. So those are the things we have experimented and we are experimenting pretty recently. Then there are other things. Third layer of that I would define would be that digital exchange, which is the third layer. That third layer, what it allows you to do, ideally it should be that part of that national health digital mission, wherein we should expose all our data to the government basically. And I really like the idea of the previous gentleman who spoke about opening up of hospital data and making it mandatory for everyone to share.
Sure.
That's
I'll come to the, there's some challenge in that sharing of data. I'll come to that point later. And just to sort of paraphrase what you were saying, unlike other sectors in hospitals, I might not like to call it customer acquisition, but if I may say the new patients that are coming in, how do you sort of encourage them to adopt more the digital kind of environment? I'll come to you, Mr. Praveen Bisht, next. In terms of, again, your experience at Amrita Hospitals in terms of digital infrastructure, what is the most critical component? Briefly, if you can mention that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. And again, want to thank APAC News Network to get everybody here. It's a wonderful opportunity. So in terms of digital infrastructure, we have a hospital right now in Kochi, and we have an upcoming hospital here in Faridabad. So that hospital was established over 20 years ago. So obviously the term digital at that time was very, very different than what we are envisaging and envisioning here in Faridabad. And with that said, it's not just about the patient data. Earlier, if you have the basic patient data, billing being the foremost was the digitalization of the hospital. Now it is across boundary, all the way from even acquiring patient, if so to speak, if I have to use that term, where patient is able to approach you via, you call it a Practo kind of application, or your own patient portals, or even a mobile app, all the way from there to continuing to engage with them once they have been discharged from the hospital. They could be engaging via telemedicine, or they are coming in person to the hospital, all the way across to their ICU stay, to their OT surgeries and stuff like that. So to me, it's end-to-end connectivity and bringing it together. As my colleague said, you have to not just have that information in silos. Unless you're able to connect it, that is when you can get the best efficiencies out of it. Thank you.
So end-to-end connectivity, about telemedicine, I'll come up in the next round. Next, we have Himanshu. Medanta is one of the largest hospitals in the country, and in terms of the digitalization effort, what you would say are the highlights of your digital journey?
Well, to us, digitization is, in today's world, the care has moved out from hospitals to homes and eventually to becoming 24/7. So to me, digitization is something wherein if I am able to deliver care to my patients at their homes 24/7, that's something which I would call digitization, whether it's my network, whether it's shared network, whether it's government's network, whatever the bandwidth, whether it's 2G, 3G, 5G, whatever it is. If my hospitals are located pan-India, can my doctors, can my practitioners see the holistic view of a patient at any location, whether that patient had got operated in Gurgaon, went for a consult or a follow-up to Lucknow, and then subsequently had another episode, let's say, at Patna. So if that is getting a unified picture, whether it's coming through a Zoom call, whether it's coming through telemedicine, whether it's coming in-person visits, it's all part of digitization journey for us.
Okay, and so how digitization is sort of helping in a standardization and uniformity of the care that is being provided. Fine. Next I'll come to Anurup. Again, Fortis, one of the major players. What has been your highlight of your digital transformation?
So Rajneesh, the way traditional healthcare is a personal touch. In a COVID time period, we understand the personal touch is now risk. we enable the telemedicine, teleconsultation, remote ICUs. The patient can see all the reports, not only reports in the one center, but all the particular episode, the way Vedanta is doing that part. Or whether it's a 2G, 3G, 4G network, the connectivity is robust connectivity. That is how we see it.
Okay, thanks. Next, I'll come to you, Balihar. At SPS hospitals, what has been your major digital achievement, if I may say?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me on this panel. So, like all the hospitals, it was the call of the day or call of the time to have this teleconsultation. So we also went in for that. But it's not like you cannot have a teleconsult in isolation. Then you have to build the whole gamut of infrastructure behind that, because suppose your patient had a consult with the doctor and sample collection team and collected the sample, then I have to make that report available digitally to that patient on its patient portal or on patient tab, and same report available to the doctor also. So in that whole, you have to set up the Wi-Fi, you have to set up the APs, then lot of backward integration you have to do. Also it should be your system should be talking to the payment gateways, it should be talking to your HIS system. And if you talk about COVID, yes, COVIDization has accelerated the growth of digitization.
So that's a very quotable quote, COVIDization accelerating digitization. Okay, thanks. We had one round, and let's focus a little bit on the telemedicine part. Coincidentally, just when the pandemic hit us and the first lockdown started, it was around that time that the telemedicine bills got passed. Despite the telemedicine bills getting passed and different kind of provisions coming under it, what we have often seen is, especially from the medical practitioner, the doctor's side, there is an apprehension on the medical legal aspects of telemedicine. So before we talk about the network infrastructure, as tech leaders of hospitals, how far you have been able to convince your doctors or medical practitioners to deliver services on telemedicine, taking care about the medical legal aspects, because that's where they are apprehensive. So Arun, maybe I'll start with you.
You see, there's a confusion in the fraternity across and in the healthcare calling telemedicine as a telemedicine, wherein mostly we are doing the only video consultation. So I don't know if somebody or any hospital has adopted the pure telemedicine per se, wherein we have IoT devices on the other side of the telemedicine system, and you are taking the parameter of the patients then and there itself remotely, and doctor is monitoring those parameters. That is not happening, I have not seen anywhere.
Okay.
It is happening mostly the video consultation. So far as the video consultation and the legal aspect of is concerned, doctors are okay so far as the prescribed prescription is being followed and is being delivered to the patient in a digital format, and same being followed by the pharmacy and delivered to the patient.
Okay. Anyone would like to add on this medical legal challenge for the doctors and how? Yes, sir.
Lots of doctors, for the ease of convenience, there are lots of doctors.
So if you can just bring your mic.
They are doing a teleconsulting like a normal WhatsApp call or phone call. So what we enable is there should be a proper recording of the teleconsultation. By this, we will be able to safeguard ourselves from the legal cases.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I was part of that call when MCI was making a presentation on what the guidelines, do's and don'ts of telemedicine. That was last year, way back in COVID. So definitely there are a lot of guidelines which a doctor has to follow or a practitioner has to follow while doing any telemedicine or video consult, like my colleague said basically. So it's same in the other way around also. Whenever you are doing a physical intervention or meeting a patient physically also, you have to follow all those guidelines. So it's as simple to what the guidelines you have to follow in the physical format, and you have to be little more careful here basically. And I think government is now supportive of all of this thing because you might have seen even Delhi government started a free tele video consultation center and they were promoting it heavily basically. So government support will always be there. Now if I were to add or make one prediction here basically, I was teaching, like I'm a teacher, I'm a speaker also, and I keep on teaching a lot of corporates also. So I was teaching global team of Citibank some time back. Simplylan asked me to do a session for 8 hours to teach them what is digital transformation and what is future of banking. So that time I predicted that there will be branchless banks basically, and similar to this now I can predict that there will be patientless hospitals or virtual care centers basically. The way we have hospitals flooded up with waiting rooms and patients waiting, to my cardiology head, patient is asking, ma'am, how much time it will take to see me? He said 2 hours basically. Patient has to patiently wait and watch till the time there are like 100 people, he's 100 number one, so you'll have to wait for 2 hours.
So you are talking about virtual
Yeah,
OPDs.
so I'm talking about virtual care centers, not only OPDs.
Okay.
I am talking about virtual care centers where there will be only doctors attending the call in a very high 5G enabled bandwidth based connectivity center, wherein most of the patient itself will have their own personal cloud and all data being uploaded there. Now you will have a e-pharmacy partner who will, if you have to prescribe any medicine, next hour within 30 minutes you will get the medicine. There will be therapeutic partners wherein like Thyrocare is powering another one. I was reading the newspaper today morning also. So similarly, like a therapeutic partner will go and do diagnostic test or whatever you want to do. And this is going to be the future wherein let's say we'll see emergence of total virtual hospitals without patients.
Okay, so this is revolutionary. Yes, yes, sir. Oh, okay, sir.
Can I take 2 minutes?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So I would like to, disagree a little bit. I think finally humans are humans. We do like touch, we do like meeting person face to face. You talk to any, not this generation. If you talk to elderly people, they'll say, "Arey yaar, kisse baat karni hai." That is, end of the day, we cannot replace that. Otherwise, it's like what is difference between humans and robots, right? So yes, because of COVID, we have accelerated in this fashion, and we'll make use of it. But at the same time, we can never ever, belittle the importance of touch, human interaction. That will continue, in my opinion.
Obviously, the human intervention will always be needed, if I may say, in the medical fraternity. Now, this revolutionary talk about the end-to-end, the virtual hospital or the end-to-end connectivity we talked about. One big challenge, big challenge there is one, we are talking about 5G network. Does 4G work properly? And beyond the metros, what is the connectivity? So my question is, and this is open to anyone who wants to take it up, in terms of one, where the quality of connectivity is across the country, and geographically in disparate regions, it varies significantly. So how would you ensure a minimum standard when we are talking about remote medicine, telemedicine, telehealth, all these things, and where the basic connectivity, and again as Arun who left, he mentioned about you can't have applications hanging. This is a matter of life and death might be. So how do you tackle this connectivity challenge? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this is something which is fairly important, and there are loads of applications coming into market from lots of vendors stating that they can do this, they can do that. But having said that, how well they would perform in a 2G network? Okay, so I don't think we are talking about 5G. You go to the remote areas, you won't even find a proper 3G, 2G. All right, so we have to look at developing the performant web applications. Basically, these applications should have the capacity to run offline, online modes, to run on low bandwidth modes. And that's the only way you will be able to deliver the right kind of services, right kind of care to your patients. Otherwise, it will get confined only to the urban areas.
Exactly.
So the most important thing is that the applications which we are using, whether they are performant or not, whether they can run on lower bandwidths, see, all other UI and other features are fancy. Main thing is the care, whether we are able to deliver the care or not.
Okay, so basically apps which can run both on offline and online mode and on low bandwidth. Anyone like to add? Yes, yes, sir.
Also want to say not only user perspective, but for the medical fraternity end, we need to see any service disruption for a 5 minute if your network gets chocked in the premises in the hospital. That also make a problem. So we need to have a dual connectivity. If one line goes down, then the second line goes to be up. There should be redundancy between the network peripherals in the hospital premises also.
Okay, okay, yes, sir.
I would like to say something here. Here, the infrastructure what we have is again raising a question that do we have a quality IT infrastructure? Are we geared up to handle these kind of situations? See, earlier, what I have seen in most of the hospitals earlier, it was like we have taken a hardware which serves the purpose that I want to have my, like it's 100 bedded, I want to serve these many patients, I'm happy with my infrastructure. But today, as we are growing, now we are running with this. We wanted to have a home care service, we wanted to have this services, but still, are we ready to invest and have a good quality infrastructure? That is the biggest question I think we have right now in front of us.
So, where would you attribute this willingness to have that infrastructure? See, one corollary of that, a hospital might invest significantly in infrastructure, but ultimately then that burden has to be passed on to the patients. So, our patients are coming from different socioeconomic strata. Are they willing to, or are they capable, first of all, at all to basically spend that much of money?
See, the answer cannot be a very straightforward answer for this. I'll give an example. Earlier, we used to have a client-server architecture where a normal application works. And still, many of the hospitals have the same infrastructure. Now, they are forcing their IT heads to do a teleconsultation with that software. So, where the question actually should be answered, I don't know, because maybe the next panel have the CEOs and everyone over here. Maybe you can take it up with them. And we do understand we have to reach out to the market, but in what way?
I think what you are asking is that, see, basically the answer lies in economics of numbers. So if you are able to reach more people, you can definitely invest as well as reduce the numbers, reduce the cost. So it's not like that it's one way. If you are able to reach more numbers, you have more people to serve, and obviously you can definitely fulfill those expenses very
So
easily.
maybe if I can ask the first thing which we started, we shouldn't take it that way. Obviously, the COVID has not been good for anyone. But if we look at the other way, that has also seen influx of more patients into hospitals. So as you were saying, numbers. So has that helped to any extent, what you were saying?
It does have, and it would help, I would say.
Okay. So
And
in
if
some
we are
way-
able to reach to the rural areas, then definitely it's going to help much more. We are only touching right now the urban areas. We have to reach to the rural areas where the core of India is.
Exactly.
So numbers are very high.
I'll add on to
Yes, sir.
Vikas this thing, that in tier 3 cities, one more challenge that we face is to find the right kind of manpower to run those already installed systems or upgraded those systems. Also, that's also one big challenge.
That was one of my next questions. Before I come to that, anyone from the audience would like to have any question for our panel? Is there any question for the audience? Okay, in fact, this question I'll just extend it a little. The IT team in a hospital. How is the IT team structured, not only in terms of size, but also in terms of the responsibilities and what are all the activities or initiatives in which you are involved? And are the hospitals still looking at the IT team merely as a cost center, or is it now considered more a profit center for the hospital? Yes, sir.
No, now IT is not considered as a cost center. The management, they view that this is a team which is really adding value to their operational things. But yes, finding resources is a challenge, and especially, as I said in then tier 3 cities, tier 2 cities, it's a bigger this thing, because they try to make the attrition towards the bigger cities. I met a lot of people over here who are working in Delhi. They had worked with me earlier, so it's a transition from. Obviously, this is natural, nothing like that. So no, IT now is really adding value, and plus, if you talk about the spread out of the IT team, then various functions are there. Then HIS applications, network management, then ERP systems are also there. So, and then of course the server maintenance, hardware maintenance. Now server maintenance is it's kind of coming down, because all the applications are now moving towards clouds, maybe Azure, AWS. So that part is coming down. But yes, still lot of big teams are required, and that too good teams.
I'll come to the HIS and cloud migration part subsequently. Yes, sir.
Rajnish, for me, like we have a different COE, Center of Excellence, who can do other different application update. But however, like how many big hospitals we have? 50, 60 across the country, or 70? Normal hospital didn't invest in the IT. For them, it's IT is a cost center. The CFO or typically the heading the department is a doctor by profession. They want to have machines. They want to see how much ROI I can get it out. From the IT point, they can't go on ROI. Except 50 hospitals, we can divide say 50 hospitals, tier 2, tier 3 city is again having challenge. They see the IT as a cost center. No, not in your case, but in a different hospital, they're saying it out.
And just to add it, finally, for hospitals, the business is coming from the patient, right? And IT does enable them to reach out to the patient, whether be it over website, be it over mobile app. So from that perspective, IT could be a cost center, but it's an enabler, and it's like a must-have, So you just can't live without it.
So is there a possibility, we are talking about hospitals in tier 3 or tier 4 cities, or smaller, even rural areas, that some of them, not everything, but some of the best technology practices which are followed by those 60, 70 hospitals you mentioned, can they take the responsibility or onus, maybe just randomly I'm saying, taking 10 hospitals under their wings, so that some of those best technology practices are sort of transferred there, and they help in terms of infrastructure? Yes.
So the way CSCs has been a great success in India, more than 3.5 lakhs. Even ITC Chopal had been a great success in the past because of connecting farmers and giving them education and all of that. So I believe that if we come together as a hospital fraternity and try to share some of our profits, basically I would say, because no hospital is non-profitable, everybody is profitable. So if we share of some of our profits and try to build something like HSC, like CSC, HSC, Healthcare Service Center, and it should be for remote centers. Let's say I as a hospital adopt 100, the other who's a bigger one with bigger turnover can adopt 1,000 basically. That is something should work for Modi ji basically.
Exactly. That's one of the ideal scenario we are talking about. Also to extend this question in terms of, as you said, the skilled workforce in IT team, whether you can sort of keep them. Obviously, they will go for career development in more IT companies and such. So what are the challenges there in terms of retaining the skilled IT workforce? And another extension is, how do you sort of make the other stakeholders, the doctors, the nurses, and even the administration more tech savvy in terms of the awareness? Tech savvy, I don't mean the hands-on they have to be, but at least have that awareness. So how are you doing that evangelization, if I may ask? Yes, sir.
On a lighter note, when this COVID came, So doctors started losing their money, and they said the best way is to start using system, and they started teleconsultation, and believe me, and believe me, the EMR has gone to a great heights now. So we were struggling to have around 30% of EMR utilization, which is now I think 80-85%. The discharge summaries all in system now. They are using their mobile, and then actually they are calling me at times. Arey Vikas, क्या कर रहा है रे? बंद हो गया तेरी application? I said, let me check on that, please. So those kind of things have really got changed. Please, you were saying something.
Yes.
I was more talking towards the how to retain talent and how to ensure that they stay with us. What we can do is form a core team which is onto technology, and then there is a team on top of it who are business analysts. So basically what happens is that when a techie interacts with the practitioner, both of them don't understand each other.
Right.
And if you allow this to continue, either of them will get pissed off and will go away. And in most likelihood, definitely a techie will go away. And as on today, the largest of the IT organizations in India are struggling to hire people in technology. When it comes to cutting edge technologies, whether it's cloud, whether it's Android-based application development, iOS-based application development, web applications, Java, whatever, you name it, and you won't find even a single person, even if you are ready to throw half a million of rupees. So it's very difficult to first of all attract that talent and then to retain them. So obviously there has to be a layer, a bridge between the two, so that both of them understand each other and do not bother each other.
Yes, the manpower practices have to change, like the press of thumb in the hospital, shift-based system. Now, when the techies come in, they expect work from anywhere. Like, I would never allow somebody to ask me that, Chhavraji, what time you come to office? So that should not happen, because
That's a mindset also.
so we have to change the mindset of people also.
Yes, sir.
Just want to share on a lighter note. Earlier I remember, my parents would say, "Oh, I wish the laptop was so easy to use as a mobile phone. पहले तो कुछ होता नहीं था." But they say, unfortunately, now mobile phone has become as complicated as a laptop. So, end of the day, it's the usability, and it is not easy. It's not easy. So, we have to bridge the gap by capacity building and just reinforcing that part. There's no shortcut to it.
Okay. Yes, sir.
And interesting over here, Praveen. So when I said that application nahi chal raha, so the person went there, then we realized software was working. Actually, his phone was not getting the network, and he said network nahi aa raha. वो भी तो तुम ही देखते हो. I said, oh yeah, that's true. So challenges are everywhere.
So one challenge we talked about is getting the people with the relevant skill set. And on the other hand, we are talking about developing applications, taking low bandwidth, working in offline mode, online mode. So I'll talk about many of the infrastructure to reduce cost. Obviously, like all other sectors, it's migrating towards cloud. That's a given. My question is from a hospital perspective. With the technology solution providers that you are working with, be it the CSPs or other ISVs who are developing applications, or anyone, any of these technology solution providers, how are the relation? So one is in terms of strictly the SLAs and things, because again, it's a matter of life and death, the sector critical infrastructure. So the SLAs really need to be stringent. So one is SLAs, and also beyond that, how challenging and do you find interacting with the tech solution providers? Yes.
Yes, earlier it was really difficult, And when I was working into this healthcare sector, I actually changed my industry. I went to the other side to understand what language I am talking that they are not able to understand. Is it actually that difficult? And yes, then I realized, because on the other side, the team who are working are not actually knowing the criticality of this side. So yes, now things are improving. They have started getting into the environment where they face the music with the doctors or with the kind of environment you are in. So yes, things are changing now a lot.
Okay. And
I would only say that rather than using custom system software development, I think each hospital should go for standardized products, global products basically, because ultimately there is something called business continuity. And when you talk to a larger player, you get them as vendor. So you get all those things which you don't expect from a vendor who's like only known to GMIT basically. And the cost.
I think that's tech to tech. When you involve BA to function, that solves the purpose. The other IT, the developing side, they have a BA, we have a function, and the alignment of function should be. IT should be only an enabler. This part, the technology, the support on the network support, the computing, but we need to also have function prospect who is leading the function, who is leading the EMR, that's your other application and the ERP and all. There should be always a function who is leading the show.
I would disagree a little bit with you in terms of that they don't understand what is being said. It's about that sector is much more organized, IT sector, as compared to any other sector. So they work on processes, they work on certain guidelines. So over a period of time, the healthcare is also evolving the way banking evolved, that they are also building a lot of processes around the way they work. See, it's not always that a system would change, a software or technology would change. Your processes or your SOPs also have to change to match the system. When you buy an off-the-shelf product like SAP, so there is a little which you can change in it. Obviously, certain amount of customizations you can do, but then there is a very little which you can change. And then what you have to do is that during the blueprinting, you have to sit down and define your processes, which right now in somebody's mind, right? And those SOPs are, when documented, it's smooth. It will run very fine without any issues.
I somehow agree with you. For example, when you going to implement any of the LIS or blood bank software, any of the software where the clinician require, so the person in the sitting in the IT, like the heads, we are sitting it out. Till the time SOP is written by the clinician or a functional team, we can't drop it out. So that's the reason I'm saying a function need to also take a call.
yes.
He's lucky to be working in a big company. So people like us working in small companies will have to wear the different hats. We have to do the business analyst job also, then functional consultant job also. So we have to manage that way. It's kind of merged into.
So, in fact, jokes apart, taking both the things in mind, you talked about the SOPs. Yes, the SOPs will work with the larger technology companies who are definitely much more process driven, and they also follow certain SOPs, and the SOPs of the hospital and IT company should sync. But what about, we are seeing a lot of these health tech companies, typically the startups, and many of them serve very important areas. The applications they have play critical roles. So there it might not be such stringent SOPs. So how is it working with these health tech providers, and how much they are contributing to the overall digital infrastructure?
So world over, the trend is that there has been a lot of health tech startup companies, and they are getting funding. Like there are companies, I remember, that they are just by doing a simple blood test, they can predict whether you will have cancer or not basically. So those are the kind of technologies getting funded heavily. Now for the implication for all of us here is that would be that ideally one should set aside a seed fund budget from our profits, and start investing in these health tech startups by taking equity. Because when you take equity, you have to get involved. When you get involved, then something better will come up. Or if you just like if you get a product from them and buy service from them, it will not help you basically. So the next best challenge for all the CEOs who will come and speak now basically, that start investing in startup healthcare companies and start taking equities in that basically.
That's a very innovative suggestion in terms of hospitals themselves incubating startup companies. We talked about, we have so far talked about what I may say the basic digital infrastructure, if you may say, about telemedicine, telehealth, the IT skills required, the overall large applications like HIS and the ERPs, migration towards cloud, these are given. What about some of the, what we hear about the new gen technologies? How much, cutting aside the hype, the marketing hype which the IT companies themselves do, how much of it is becoming mainstream? I am talking about things like artificial intelligence or augmented reality, virtual reality. We hear a little bit about telesurgery and things, maybe one or two cases. I think in the Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Hospital in Hyderabad, they did 2 or 3 telesurgeries, but how far is it to becoming mainstream, and what are some of these new gen technologies which you are seeing? Again, I'd like to keep it open, anyone.
I think when you talk about automation, most of the people refer to or they jump on the bandwagon where it comes to low-hanging fruits. So RPA is very, very common in that. Then dictation, transcription is also getting there. When it comes to really predictive part of it, I think there are still to be adopted in a larger scale, and it's not easy also, right? Because end of the day, we don't want 95% accuracy. We want 100% accuracy, right? Because you can't play with life of a patient. It is much more precious to all of us. So I think that is somewhere where I see the obstacle, but with time, it will definitely get adopted. And the other challenge part is to have it part of the ecosystem, like again, end-to-end integration. It can't be a standalone technology itself unless it is interacting with your HIS. For that, we have to adopt standards. You have to adopt HL7 messages. You have to adopt ICD-10 coding. You have to adopt CPT codes. So unless you do that, it will not be part of your ecosystem, and it will always remain as a silo sitting, at outside your main
You
work.
mentioned about RPA even having sensors and these IoT things. So anyone would like, yes.
Okay, so we have been quite fortunate that we have always tried to invest in technology as an organization. And you may have seen very recently our partnership with Cure AI. So this is something which is a very interesting thing which we are doing, wherein the X-rays done at our remote locations. What used to happen is that we are running a lot of these programs in remote areas of Haryana, TB-free Haryana and all. So wherein our vans travel to those remote places, do the scan of the patients. Once these vans reach to a place where there is a proper connectivity, then those scans are pushed to our PACS systems, and then those are reported against by our radiologists. Now, we have provided for these technologies within our vans, wherein the scans travel within that van to the Cure AI system, and it is then and there reported with a basic understanding for the clinician over there itself. Obviously, it is then once the van is back, then again it is revalidated and re-reported. But the primary reporting is already there with the clinician.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So this artificial intelligence to be successful, we need a big pool of data. As of now, which is not there. Because I'll just give an example that in India, even this adverse reactions, etc., at times are not captured in the system. Hospitals, people are still reluctant to show it in the open. Whereas in US, etc., all these things are kind of understood thing that if there is any adverse reaction or something like that it has to be captured into the system and all. So as of now, basis the Indian data, the pathways, clinical pathways, artificially we are not able to develop because we have very limited set of data as of now. This is my understanding.
Okay. Okay. So, before we conclude, I'd like to pose one question to each panelist. In the morning, even we talked about resilient and sustainable healthcare. How much role digital technology is right now playing in ensuring a more sustainable and resilient healthcare system? I'll start with you and come this way.
So as I said that just now, that data is very important thing. This in the resilient healthcare, more the data we capture, that will be, you know, kind of better for the developing the pathways, developing the clinical protocols. So digital is going to play a big role.
Okay.
So it all depends how soon we are able to
So
do
the
that.
data sample size should be bigger, so
Yes.
that more better it can be analyzed, if I may say.
Yeah, so it like say we might be, you know, capturing drug interaction, but there might be very few hospitals which might be, you know, recording drug to food interaction or something like that.
Okay, got it. So, yes,
So which I see like digitalization in hospital is a necessity. It's a key. Without the digitalization, we can't proceed. Like the way I see is IT is patient care impacted by IT? Yes, it's too. Like for me, digitalization is important.
okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, having a system is one thing, but being able to adopt, being able to use is another. And I would just like to give a incident that has happened when I was working in the US for one of the big healthcare systems. So there we were struggling to move the doctors from ICD-9 to ICD-10, and somebody jokingly said, "Oh, in India, you know, we moved it long time back." So the reason is we don't use it at all. So moving from 9 to 10 is not a big deal. But in the US where it is being used in and out, obviously moving from ICD-9 to 10 was a big deal. So I just want to share that.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
Even if we are doing that coding, there are no checks, no audits on that.
Right. No audit on that.
There is no accountability actually.
Yes, sir.
So digital technologies are definitely going to play a bigger role, but we would only say that always have quick win solutions, and then you should have the ability to see bigger picture also. We all have to be part of a bigger picture which everybody else is conceptualizing. Plus, and it should not be a product driven solution. I bought a product and it's a digital transformation done in my company. And it should not be that top 5 consulting company will only come and do digital transformation here. Okay, so we have to look at quick wins, and there are solutions. There are various areas, like let's say it might help in AI diagnostics. Like if a doctor, currently typically a typical doctor to patient consultation is how much seconds, how many seconds? Hardly half a minute to 1.5 minutes basically, or even lesser than that basically. And even
Sure.
that too at a very long distance basically. So they will have a screen in between. So ideally the doctor, the moment patient feels the history part has to be automated much before he meets the doctor via some digital systems. The data should come at one place, and before the patient intervention is happening physically with the doctor, AI diagnostics should have run before doctor
Yes,
says,
so
boss.
this is that data
AI
and the
diagnostic, basically.
analytics on that part. Yes, sir.
Digitalization in any hospital, or in fact in any industry, moves as per the business plan. And being in IT, I believe only in one thing: to have right technology at right price for right people at the right time. I firmly believe in
So
this.
all 4 rights.
Yeah, all
Only
4
then
rights, yeah.
It will work. Yes, sir.
Well, I would see that as long as my clinicians see IT as part of their fraternity, that would be the digitization for me rather than anything else. So if at all they feel that yes, I'm adding value to what they do, that would be true success of digitization. There are a lot of things which can be done, and there are a lot of things which are being envisaged. For example, remote ICUs. Now, this is something wherein we saw in COVID times that an ICU doctor is something which are most in demand. Now, how many ICU doctors you have across rather the entire country? Now, think of a situation where there are people who are in remote areas or who are at the border, even our armed forces. There are camps made where there are sufferers or there are patients out there. What if the ICU care can be given to them right from, let's say, Gurgaon or from Delhi? There is somebody who is able
That's
to
more
monitor
democratization of healthcare.
Yep. What if somebody is able to monitor and look at the entire gamut of all the vitals of that patient remotely, understand those, and then prescribe something to somebody who is nearby, so that at least he can live for another 24 hours before he is airlifted to a nearby hospital.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So we discussed some important aspects, some specific technologies related to telemedicine, remote health, then the connectivity infrastructure issues, having applications in offline or online mode, in low bandwidth capability. Then we talked about, more importantly, the issues around the affordability, the relationship with technology solution providers, and more importantly, the attitude of different stakeholders in the ecosystem regarding digitization, and maybe the COVID thing, as one panelist mentioned, COVIDization of digitization. So that has helped. So this is a wonderful panel, and I would like to express my gratitude to all the panelists for having participated in such an interactive and wonderful discussion. Before we disperse, may I request Ms. Sanghamitra Mohanty, Director of APAC News Network, to present a small token of appreciation to all our panelists. You can start from that side. That side. Okay, so Balihar Virk. Anurup Sehgal. Yeah. So small token of appreciation for Mr. Balihar Virk. Token of appreciation for Anurup Sehgal. Token of appreciation for Vikas Bhatnagar. Small token of appreciation for Ajay Chabra. Token of appreciation for Praveen Bisht. Token of appreciation for Anurup Sehgal. One token of appreciation for Himanshu Bharadwaj. And may I request all the panelists for a quick photo.